For more than 2,000 years, countless voices have spoken the same words, morning after morning, night after night. Words repeated so often, they have become part of the fabric of human consciousness. The Lord's Prayer is known across every land and every tongue, yet almost no one understands what it truly means. It has been spoken by billions, but felt by few. What if its true purpose was never to create religion, but to awaken remembrance? What if every line holds a hidden structure, a sacred pattern meant not to ask, but to align? The prayer we know today is the surface of something far deeper. The version most of the world recites is filtered through centuries of translation and interpretation, shaped by doctrine and dogma. But the words Jesus spoke were not Greek, not Latin. They were Aramaic, the living sound of the heart. In that language, each syllable carries energy, tone, and vibration. It does not merely describe reality, it shapes it. The prayer, in its original form, was not a collection of phrases. It was a living frequency, a spiritual technology designed to attune the human being to the consciousness of the divine. When Jesus said Abba, he was not addressing a distant father in the sky. In Aramaic, Abba represents the source itself, the creative breath that gives birth to all things, the union of the masculine and the feminine, the origin from which existence flows. It is not a name, but a vibration, the sound of unity itself. And when he said Bashmaya, translated later as in heaven, he was not referring to a location beyond the stars. In Aramaic, it means the realm of subtle vibration, the invisible field that sustains and gives rise to all forms. Heaven is not far away. Heaven is the frequency of being itself, the invisible pattern beneath everything that lives. So when he began with our Father who art in heaven, he was not directing us to look upward, but inward. He was revealing that the divine is not somewhere beyond reach. It is the essence of consciousness within every breath, every heartbeat, every moment of awareness. The opening line of the prayer is not a petition. It is a recognition. It is the act of remembering what we are. Over time, the sacred meaning of these words was obscured. Layers of translation dulled their power. Ritual replaced understanding. What began as a living code for awakening became a formula recited in sleep. Yet, the original current still flows beneath the surface, waiting for those who listen not only with their ears, but with their being. To speak this prayer as it was meant to be spoken is to step beyond religion and into resonance. It is to align your inner life with the same rhythm that moves the stars. The prayer is not asking for something to descend from above. It is awakening what has always been within. Once you begin to hear the vibration hidden in the words, the meaning changes forever. The prayer becomes alive again, not as belief, but as experience, not as repetition, but as realization. This is where understanding begins. The next words of the prayer carry a power that few have ever felt. Hallowed be thy name. Simple, familiar, but in Aramaic, it opens an entirely different dimension. The original phrase, Nethkadash Shmach, does not mean to merely praise or glorify a distant God. It means, may your name be made holy within us. It is not about speaking the divine. It is about becoming it. The prayer moves from language to embodiment, from words to vibration, from belief to experience. In the world of ancient mysticism, a name was not a label. It was a frequency. To know the true name of a thing was to touch its essence. So when Jesus spoke of the divine name, he was not referring to a word that could be written or pronounced. He was pointing toward a living current, the vibration of pure being that flows through all life. To hallow that name is to awaken that vibration within ourselves, to make sacred the space of consciousness where the infinite and the finite meet. The phrase is not an act of worship, it is an act of alignment. When you speak those words with awareness, you are inviting the eternal frequency of creation to resound through your own voice, through your breath, through every particle of your being. The prayer becomes a tuning process, bringing your inner sound into harmony with the universal note that sustains all existence. For centuries, people have spoken the name of God with their lips, but not with their hearts. They have repeated it as tradition, unaware that the true sanctification happens not in sound, but in resonance. To hallow the name is to allow its vibration to reorder you from within, to dissolve fragmentation, to restore coherence, to remember unity. In Aramaic thought, Shmak, the name, represents the active presence of the divine, not a word to be spoken, but an energy to be embodied. It is the current of intelligence that animates life, the luminous breath that holds galaxies together. To make it holy is to remember that this intelligence lives in you. It is not separate, not hidden, not waiting to be found in some distant realm. It is the silent witness behind every thought, the light that perceives through your eyes, the awareness that never sleeps. When you say, "Hallowed be thy name," you are not declaring something about God. You are awakening something within yourself. You are affirming that your consciousness is capable of reflecting the divine pattern, that your words, your actions, and your very being can become a vessel of that sacred vibration. The prayer shifts here from recognition to embodiment, from understanding to transformation. Once this truth is realized, the entire structure of the prayer begins to unfold differently. Each line is no longer a request, but a revelation, each phrase a step in the process of awakening. And as you continue, you begin to see that the next words, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done," are not about waiting for something to descend from above, but about allowing what is eternal to rise within. The next line of the prayer carries a secret that has been hidden in plain sight for centuries. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Most people hear these words and imagine a future moment, a divine order that will one day descend upon the world. But in the original Aramaic, the meaning is not passive. It is not about waiting for heaven to arrive. It is about allowing it to awaken within. The ancient word Tete Malkuthak does not mean bring your kingdom, but let your kingdom arise within us. The prayer is not a request for something external to appear. It is a call for alignment, a moment of surrender to the rhythm already moving through creation. Malka, the kingdom, does not refer to a monarchy or a place of power. It represents divine order, the harmony that unfolds when human will and divine will merge into one. It is not a realm to be entered. It is a state of being to be remembered. When Jesus spoke these words, he was guiding his followers to realize that heaven and earth are not two separate worlds, but reflections of the same principle. What happens above echoes below. The microcosm mirrors the macrocosm. Consciousness shapes form, and form reveals consciousness. On earth as it is in heaven is not a comparison. It is a law. The same energy that organizes galaxies moves through every breath you take. The same intelligence that governs the stars governs the heartbeat of every living soul. To say "Thy kingdom come" is to open oneself to that intelligence, to invite the harmony of the higher order to express itself through thought, word, and action. It is to release the illusion of separation, the belief that divine will and personal will are in conflict. When you align with the pattern of creation, choice and destiny become one movement. There is no struggle, only flow. No resistance, only awareness. In Aramaic, Newe Sevyanik, thy will be done, speaks not of obedience, but of synchronization. It is not about submitting to an external authority. It is about realizing that your true will and the will of the divine are not two. The moment you awaken to this, you begin to live from the center of creation, rather than from the edges of fear. Every action becomes an expression of the whole. Every breath becomes prayer. This is the essence of the teaching. Jesus was not describing a faraway paradise or promising a future salvation. He was revealing the inner mechanics of creation itself. The kingdom is not later. It is now. It is the field of presence that appears when the mind grows still and the heart remembers its origin. It is the moment when heaven and earth are no longer opposites, but one vibration expressed through two worlds. To live in that awareness is to step into divine order. To speak these words consciously is to bring the frequency of heaven into form, to become the bridge through which spirit touches matter. The prayer was never meant to end in words. It was meant to begin in experience. And when this realization settles into the heart, the next line unfolds naturally. Give us this day our daily bread. A phrase that sounds simple, yet hides one of the deepest truths about human existence, the nourishment not only of the body, but of the soul. Give us this day our daily bread. For most, it sounds like a simple request, a plea for food, sustenance, or provision. But in the language Jesus spoke, these words hold layers of meaning that reach far beyond the physical. In Aramaic, the phrase Havlan Lakma Desunkanan Yomana can be translated in many ways, and each one reveals a different level of understanding. Lakma can mean bread, yes, but also understanding, wisdom, or even vitality. It speaks not only of nourishment for the body, but of the energy that sustains consciousness itself. The word sunkanan implies continuity, something that is needed not once, but again and again, every day, every moment. Jesus was not teaching people to beg for food from heaven. He was showing them how to receive the constant flow of divine energy that nourishes the soul. The daily bread he spoke of is the inner manna, the subtle current of life that feeds the spirit and keeps it in harmony with creation. Across mystical traditions, this truth repeats itself in different forms, that what we take into ourselves, whether food, thought, or experience, shapes the very nature of our being. Physical nourishment sustains the body, but spiritual nourishment sustains awareness. The prayer becomes a reminder to live consciously, to receive life with reverence, to digest every moment as a sacred exchange between the visible and the invisible. To ask for daily bread is to open yourself to divine sustenance, to recognize that every breath, every heartbeat, every instant of being is a gift of energy flowing from the source. It is to awaken gratitude, not only for what is seen, but for what is unseen, for the invisible stream that moves through all existence. When you speak these words with understanding, you are not asking for something to be given. You are remembering that everything is already being given. Life itself is the bread. Awareness is the nourishment. The prayer is not about lack, it is about connection. In the rhythm of this line lies a universal truth, that every moment carries the opportunity to be fed by the divine, whether through beauty, through silence, through learning, or through challenge. The soul receives what it needs to awaken. The key is not in asking, but in receiving, not in reaching outward, but in opening inward. This is the living meaning of daily bread. It is not limited to the food on the table. It is the energy of consciousness, the flow of divine intelligence that renews us with each sunrise. To live in awareness of this flow is to live in the presence of God, moment by moment, breath by breath. And as the prayer continues, the energy shifts. After nourishment comes purification. After receiving comes release. The next words open the doorway to one of the deepest spiritual laws ever spoken. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Few lines in human history have been spoken more often than these, yet few have been understood more deeply. To most, they sound like an act of confession, a request for mercy from a higher power, a promise to extend the same mercy to others. But in the original Aramaic, the meaning is not about guilt or punishment. It is about energy, movement, and the restoration of balance. The ancient phrase, washbak lan haubein, ikana davhanan, shbuokan, lahayobin, can be translated as, release us from our errors, as we also release those who have erred against us. The word for trespass, haubein, means debts or missed targets, moments when we have fallen out of alignment with the flow of divine order. In this understanding, sin is not crime, it is dissonance. It is the forgetting of who we are. And forgiveness is not pardon, it is restoration. It is the act of returning to harmony with the current of creation. To forgive is to free. It is to dissolve the energy that binds us to pain, resentment, and separation. Every grudge held is a weight carried. Every unhealed wound is a wall between the self and the source. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is the reclaiming of flow. When Jesus spoke these words, he was describing not morality, but resonance, the law that what we release is what releases us. As we let go, we are let go. This is not a transaction. It is a principle. Forgiveness is the mechanism by which energy becomes free again. It restores coherence where fragmentation once existed. When you forgive, you are not erasing the past. You are returning to the present. You are allowing life to move through you again. In Aramaic thought, this was not about asking God to erase mistakes, but about opening the heart to the natural rhythm of renewal. The divine does not hold grudges, it continues to create. The universe does not condemn, it transforms. So when we speak these words, we are aligning ourselves with that same pattern of regeneration. To say forgive us as we forgive is to acknowledge that the flow must move in both directions. The energy we wish to receive must be the energy we are willing to give. If we hold tightly to anger, the current stops. If we open, the current moves again. Forgiveness becomes not an act of morality, but of physics, the law of resonance returning to balance. When understood in this way, this line of the prayer becomes a meditation on release. It is an invitation to let go of every burden we have carried against ourselves and against others. It reminds us that the freedom we seek is the freedom we give. And once this release begins, once the current is restored, the soul becomes lighter. It begins to remember its natural rhythm. And from that rhythm, the next words arise like a prayer within the prayer. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. This line has confused generations. How could a loving Creator lead anyone into temptation? Why would divine intelligence test its own children? The answer lies once again in the original language. In Aramaic, The phrase "Wela ta'alan la nisyuna elapatsan min bisha" carries a different meaning entirely. It does not imply that God tempts, nor that we are to fear some external trial. It is a plea for awareness, a prayer that we not enter the state of forgetfulness. The word nisyuna does not mean temptation in the moral sense. It means trial, testing, or challenge, the moments in life that draw us away from the center of our being. And the verb talan means to be drawn into, to be led toward. So the line might better be heard as, "Do not let us be pulled into the illusion that separates us from truth." It is not a request to escape life's tests, but to remain awake within them. It is a reminder that every challenge is a mirror showing us where we have forgotten who we are. The word bisha, commonly translated as evil, also carries a subtler meaning. In Aramaic, it points to chaotic energy, to discord, to the fragmentation that arises when we fall out of resonance with divine order. Evil is not a being lurking in shadows. It is the state of disconnection itself, the moment when consciousness forgets its source. Deliverance, then, is not a rescue from outside, but a return to wholeness within. When Jesus spoke these words, he was teaching a truth known to the mystics of every age, that awakening is not about avoiding darkness, but about remaining aware in the midst of it. Temptation is not a test from God. It is the pull of forgetfulness that appears whenever we drift from presence. To pray not to enter temptation is to pray to stay awake, to see through the illusions that cloud the mind. And to be delivered from evil is to be restored to clarity, to the state of oneness where no fragment can survive. Every human life moves through these currents, light and shadow, remembrance and forgetfulness. The prayer does not ask for the storm to end. It asks for the anchor of awareness to hold. It asks that we not be lost in the dream of separation, that we not mistake the temporary for the eternal. To be delivered from evil is to see through illusion and realize that the light was never absent, only unseen. When spoken with understanding, this line is not about fear, but freedom. It is the moment when the soul reclaims its awareness, when consciousness returns to its natural state of clarity. It is a call to stay awake amid the dream of the world, to remember the truth beneath every illusion. And from that remembrance comes peace. The prayer has led us through recognition, embodiment, alignment, and release. Now it comes to its final affirmation, the closing phrase that returns everything to the source from which it came. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. These final words were added later in some translations of the prayer, yet their essence completes the circle. Whether or not they appeared in the earliest manuscripts, their message carries the vibration of truth. They bring the journey back to its beginning, the remembrance that everything we have sought has always belonged to the one source. The words Malkutha, Haila, Watashbukta, kingdom, power, and glory, form a triad of meaning found in the oldest mystical traditions. Malkutha represents divine order, the harmony of the universe itself. It is the field in which all things move and have their being. Haila is the life force, the power that animates creation, the energy that flows through every breath, every star, every soul. And Teshbukta is the radiance, the expression of that power as beauty, as awareness, as glory. Together, they describe the endless cycle of creation, order, energy, and light, flowing as one eternal movement. To speak these words is to recognize that nothing belongs to us, and yet everything flows through us. The kingdom is the structure of existence, the framework of divine intelligence. The power is the current that moves within it. The glory is the awareness of that movement, consciousness knowing itself. When you feel these words rather than simply recite them, you realize that they are not a closing statement. They are the revelation itself. For thine is the kingdom, not as possession, but as truth. The kingdom is not somewhere else. It is the living presence within and around all things. The power, the energy that sustains life, is the pulse of that kingdom. It moves through every particle of being, and the glory, the light of consciousness, is what allows that pulse to be seen, to be known, to be loved. In this final affirmation, the prayer completes its arc. It begins with our Father, the source of all, and ends with the recognition that everything returns to that same source. What began as invocation becomes realization. What began as words becomes awareness. There is no separation between the one who prays and the one to whom the prayer is offered. They are the same consciousness speaking to itself through different forms. To say forever, le'alam in Aramaic, is to acknowledge that this cycle has no beginning and no end. It is the eternal movement of creation within itself. It is the breath that never ceases, the light that never fades. The prayer ends not in conclusion, but in continuation. It is the silence after the sound, the stillness in which everything rests. And when this truth is felt, the Lord's Prayer becomes something entirely different. It is no longer a ritual. It is a map, a living code that returns the soul to its original frequency, to the awareness that all power, all beauty, all being flows from and through the same eternal source. The journey of these words was never meant to end on paper or in sound. It was meant to end in realization, the knowing that the divine has never been elsewhere, never been distant, never been outside. When the prayer is finally understood, everything changes. It is no longer a sequence of words repeated by memory, but a living pattern, a mirror reflecting the structure of the universe itself. Each phrase reveals a step, each vibration an awakening. What began as sound becomes realization. What began as devotion becomes direct experience. Jesus was not offering a doctrine. He was offering a technology of consciousness, a way to harmonize the human being with the divine order of creation. Every line of the Lord's Prayer is a movement of energy, from remembrance to embodiment, to surrender, to return. It is a journey of awakening from separation to unity. Over the centuries, this understanding was hidden, not lost by accident, but covered by design. As institutions grew, power replaced presence, and words were given more importance than the silence beneath them. The sacred science became ritual. The formula of awakening became repetition. Humanity learned to speak the prayer, but forgot to live it. And yet, nothing truly sacred can ever be erased. The vibration remains, waiting beneath the surface of language, ready to awaken in those who listen with the heart. The time of remembrance is returning. What was once hidden is being revealed again, not as belief, but as experience, not as religion, but as realization. When you understand this prayer as it was spoken, you realize that it was never about reaching towards something far away. It was about awakening to what has always been within. The divine is not distant. It is the awareness looking through your eyes, the silence behind every thought, the stillness that has never left you. To speak the words now is to activate that memory. To feel the rhythm behind them is to step into the same frequency that shaped the stars. And once that realization dawns, there is no going back. The Lord's Prayer becomes not a petition, but a portal, not a tradition, but a transformation. This is not theology. It is remembrance. It is the moment the seeker realizes that the search was never outward and that the kingdom he longed for has always been within. And if these words resonated with something deep inside you, if they stirred a sense of recognition, as though you've always known this truth, it means the memory has already begun to awaken. Let it continue. Share this understanding. Speak it. Reflect on it. Let it live through you. Because the more we remember together, the faster the world itself begins to awaken. So if this message touched you, take a moment to support its light. Leave your reflection below. Share it with someone who seeks, and join the circle of those who remember. Each act of awareness ripples farther than you can imagine. The prayer was never meant to end in words. It was meant to begin in you.